Hi, welcome back. This is Lee Jasper's Drive Time. We've been away for some time, but we've been very busy. Elections, new government, genetic fascists and white supremacists being employed by Boris Johnson, deportations to Jamaica. It's been incredibly busy, but we're really glad to be back. This week's show is a blockbuster. We've got an interview with Sharon Vitalis. She's the daughter of an RAF officer born in Germany, denied British citizenship, a victim of the hostile environment. We also have an interview with the mother, Alina Jospeh, of Christopher Kapisa. You may have seen it, the story that I broke nationally on my blog spot, which is a 13-year-old black boy that was pushed in a river. You won't believe the conclusion that the Crown Prosecution and South Wales Police came to. And of course, we have our regular feature, Brixton Analytica, bringing you a range of contemporary news items from right across the country for your personal interest. You're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time. Stick with us.
Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, London, and you're watching Lee Jasper Drive Time.
Sharon Vitalis, welcome to Lee Jasper Drive Time. Now, I've known about your case for some time, and we've been desperately trying to organise an interview, so I'm glad 2020 come and we finally get there.
At last.
Tell us a little bit about your story and what happened to you.
Yes, my name is Sharon Vitalis. I was born in 1972 in Germany, and at the time I was born, my dad was in the Air Force. He was a serving soldier. My dad had joined the Air Force in 1964. He was 17 years old. Got married to my mom in 1969. Had 6 kids. I was the 5th one and the only one born in Germany while he was working. The others were born in England and they were all British citizens. I was the only exemption because I was born in Germany. That's what I've been told.
So your father was St. Lucian by birth?
St. Lucian by birth. Migrated here in 1962 when he was 15.
Right.
And he finished his secondary schooling, was recruited here for the Royal Air Force while he was living here in London, and he joined them in 1964.
How long did he serve in the Royal Air Force?
He served for 13 years.
13 years, long time.
Yeah.
So he's part of the Windrush generation?
He was indeed.
Now, you're born in on British soil, a Royal Air Force base, as it were, in Germany, with a father that's serving in the Air Force. But yet, you had your citizenship stripped away from you. How did that happen?
Yes, I have been told by the Home Office and by the Nationality Department that at the time of my birth, my father was a British subject, so I was a British subject. But due to the fact that I was born in Germany, when St. Lucia became independent in 1978, where Daddy never went back then, he lost his British subject status. He became a British citizen. Therefore, I became British citizen, St. Lucian citizen at that time.
So hold on, because Daddy was living here and St. Lucia became independent. And Daddy was a British subject up to that point. Presumably, he didn't apply to regularise his status. Assuming that I'm a member of the Royal Air Force, I must be British. So he didn't do that. So whilst your brothers and sisters were born here and they're automatic British citizens, you are the odd one out, and you were deemed to be St. Lucian, even though you were born in Germany.
While he was working.
While he was a serving officer in the Royal Air Force.
But for the fact he was working, I would be born in London like everyone else.
So they're treating you as if your parents were on holiday in Germany or something.
Definitely.
Your father was serving Queen and country, in doing a great job, and you've paid a heavy price for being born in Germany.
Yep. And they've acknowledged it because they issued me with a British birth certificate, so they have not acknowledged my birth, but I'm thrown aside as not being British because I was born in Germany.
So you had your citizenship denied you. When did you first know and find out?
First time I encountered anything was in the late 2000s. I applied for a passport and I've since done so for 3 times, and they've all turned me down with the same document saying that St. Lucia was independent, I'm not a British citizen anymore. So I've found excerpts of 4 documents that does say because he's in Crown service, any children that he have abroad while he was working are deemed as being born on British soil, or as deemed as being automatically British.
So you got documents, official documents that say if you're serving in the Crown and your children are born on the Army base or the Royal Air Force base, then they automatically are British citizens.
Yes, Home Office documents.
You got Home Office documents, and yet the Home Office is continually denying you your right to a passport.
Yeah.
What's been the implication of that for you?
I was struck off as a nurse. I was a nurse for 25 years.
So you're a registered nurse?
Working in the NHS, working in A&E, and that was 2013. I was given deportation paperwork. I had to give it to my employees, and they suspended me immediately pending an investigation, which culminated in 2016, where they eventually struck me off as a nurse. The English register and the European register.
So your whole profession
was stripped off of me.
Was stripped off of you simply because the Home Office refused to accept that you are a daughter of the servant of the Crown, born on a RAF base in Germany, and your rights to British citizenship were denied you on that basis.
Yes. They said I was working illegally and I had no right to work in this country.
So you were a victim of the hostile environment.
Definitely.
And what's been the impact upon?
I mean, when I was struck off, at that time I lost Daddy just around that same month before.
You died?
He died. He died. He was diagnosed with cancer, and then he died 2 months later, so that was a sudden death. He died up here. And months later, my brother committed suicide. He lived up here. So I went through all of that, and then I was having financial problems. I couldn't work at that time. I was able to go back to work for a short period, but this case was still overhanging me. I got into gambling, I got into depression, I got into financial problems. I started with offending behavior where I was gambling, and eventually I got a prison sentence, 14 months in prison, which was a good thing. It did rehabilitate me, definitely, but it did mess me up, and that's all as a result of everything that was happening.
So you lost your job, you lost your profession, you lost your status, you lost your life, you lost your father, you lost your brother, you became depressed, you couldn't earn a living, you became addicted to gambling, you got involved in some offending fraud behaviour, you were given a sentence, you served your sentence, which helped you rehabilitate yourself, and you came out, but you were still not a British citizen.
Still not a British citizen, still liable for deportation at the time I came out of prison.
And has the government tried to deport you?
They tried numerous times while I was inside, but thankfully I had people backing me up, and I was able to be released and deal with that situation on the outside.
So how many times have they tried to deport you?
3 times.
They tried to deport you 3 times?
Yeah.
And what's been the impact upon you and your family?
Sometimes I feel as if I'm useless to my kids because it is affecting my kids. And sometimes I sit and I say to myself, I'm not being the mother I should be being, because my daughter's 21. She was born here and she's been deprived of her nationality because of me. And my son is 14, so he can't go on school trips. My daughter can't travel with her friends. She can't go into university. And it's just continually going on and on. My life is lived. I'm 47 years old, but my kids are still coming up.
How old are your children now?
21, 14.
And their status is they were born here, but they're not British citizens.
Because I'm not a British citizen.
Do you think the colour of your skin's got anything to do with this?
Definitely. I've met a lot of army children my age, born in 1967, 68, and they don't have a problem. I've put it on Twitter. Everyone is shocked. So most people just say, it's the colour of your skin.
Where do you go from here in terms of?
Well, I want to try and put this case legally forward again to either the passport office, and then if they refuse me, then just have to try and take them to court on a judicial review and see let a judge decide, because my case has never been heard or put in front of a judge.
That's expensive.
Yes. It is.
And are you currently working?
I'm currently training for a new position, but I'm not currently earning a salary that could help me. So
you if you could get this sorted out, you could go back to being a nurse. You could go back to be the NHS, because they'd have to give you back your registration because
that was the reason why I lost it in the first place.
Because you were illegally denied that registration. So you could resume your career if the Home Office would only see sense and give you and your family some justice.
Yeah.
How's it affected your daughters and children?
It does affect them. It does upset them when they can't travel.
So they can't go anywhere?
They can't go anywhere.
School trips?
No school trips, and definitely university, because my daughter, I mean, she's looking forward to building her future, but she doesn't know where her future is going to be because she can't go to university. She can't decide what she wants to be because she can't start university.
And your 14-year-old, he can't go anywhere? Does he miss out on school trips?
He does, and sometimes he does say, Mom, when am I going to have a passport? So it's bad.
It's bad.
I put a front up, but it's very bad.
We're going to continue to follow your story, and we're looking to bring you back. But if you had a message for Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, the new Home Secretary, and the people in the Home Office who treated you, quite frankly, in this almost vindictive, vicious, appalling way, what it seems to be on the basis of your colour of your skin, another victim of this racist, hostile environment, what would that message be?
I think if they put applications, let them have a face, because if you're dealing with applications and numbers and you're dealing with me like a general person, I mean, if they take the time out and look through an application and see the reasons why and stuff, I don't think they have a clue. A lot of people are not born in the UK. Boris Johnson is not born in the UK. I'm sure Priti Patel has some ethnicity somewhere out of the UK. And I was born while Daddy was doing one of the most precious jobs in this continent, serving the Queen. And I'm suffering because of that fact. Sometimes I say that's the worst thing that my father could have done. Because if he didn't do that, he would have us all here in the UK. And that's wrong, because I should be proud of him. And I'm not, because it's affected my whole life.
So the decision has besmirched your father's memory, because had he not been in the Royal Air Force, you'd have been British.
Yeah, because...
But him having served Queen and country, you've paid the price, and your family continue to pay the price, despite him being a loyal citizen of the Crown.
Yeah. And if they had told him, listen, let your wife not have this baby in Germany, Mommy would have just come back to England and have me.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be the case.
That shouldn't be the case. Well, we'll certainly be raising your issue with the Home Office. I'm sure people will be watching this. Sharon Vitalis, thank you for coming on the Lee Jasper Drivetime. We will revisit your case again, but I'm happy that we've been able to get the time to bring this case to the attention of the public. It's an absolutely extraordinary case. It's contrasted with the way that white British Army personnel who have children abroad are treated. And again, another indication and an illustration of how vicious the hostile environment is and how much lives like yours it's leading to destruction, ill health, mental instability, and we wish you all the best in getting this sorted out. We'll certainly be supporting you in that regard.
Yeah, thank you for having me, getting my story across.
I went down to Cardiff, Butetown Community Centre, to meet with the family of Christopher Kapisa, and I attended a press conference at which we all spoke. But before the press conference, I had an interview with Alina, Jospeh, Christopher Kapisa's mother. You'll want to watch this as she relates the horror that has overcome her family after the death of her 13-year-old son.
Miss Alina, Jospeh, we're here at the press conference at Butetown Community Centre to talk about this tragic death of your son. Can you tell us how this death has impacted you and your family over the course of the last 8 months?
it's been crippling. Sometimes words can't really describe the pain that we have, we're still going through. It's a very wounding experience. There's not a time that goes by that we don't miss Christopher, but there's also not a time whereby you feel so shocked, so you're in so much pain, seeing pain and frustration, you know, as well as anxieties, seeing the way that we have been treated by South Wales Police and now the CPS.
Tell us what the CPS decision, what they've decided not to prosecute anybody. What's your view about that decision?
I was, I don't know, for me, it was like, I was basically being told that Christopher had died for the second time, but this time that, you know, we're letting the person who put him in that situation go free, as well as all the other people who were involved in Christopher's death. You know, people have basically just disguised it, lied about the truth, and now to find out that there is so much or sufficient evidence, as they say, that you know, to charge the perpetrator with Christopher's death, but they're gonna get away with it. No mention of any of the other individuals who were there, children as well as their parents.
What is your hope now in relation to justice for your son?
Christopher, as well as any other human being, he's a child that was valued and that should also be valued. And, you know, I want to see justice done. I want, you know, Christopher's death cannot have been in vain. It doesn't make no sense. Christopher deserves justice. He deserves to be valued. You know, yeah.
Do you think it would have been different had Christopher been a white boy and there were 14 black boys or black children who were...
Oh, definitely. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. If it was 14 black boys, Christopher being the perpetrator, the family of that boy would have, you know, seek justice to the end. They would have got justice. We wouldn't even have had to be waiting around, all these delays, all these, you know, excuses, lies. You know, he would, from day one, if it was Christopher, he would have been in jail. He would have been paying for what he had done. But for, you know, for this boy and all the people that were involved who lied about the initial the things that occurred at the river at the time, and for them they've just been allowed to get away with it.
And what's your message to the wider community out there in relation to the... I know that lots of people in your local village were very helpful and supportive in the initial aftermath of your son's death.
My message to the wider community is that we're all supposed to be united, you know. Spread some love, show each other love. It shouldn't be about the differences in our race, you know, ethnicity, gender, disability, or whatever. You know, we need to value each other's life. We need to appreciate it, you know. And for everyone, you know, watching or listening to me right now, if you look at the facts, the evidence, you know, yes, judge it for yourself, but it's so obvious about the flaws, the neglects, and how can you know, anyone else just let this pass us by and nobody question it? They have, you know, we all have to start questioning what is going on with all these institutions that we are supposed to trust, and you know, our lives too, our children too, and they are failing us in every way. You know, this shouldn't be allowed to go on any longer. So I'm seeking justice for Christopher, and I know so many people adored and admired Christopher out there. You know, I know you'll be also trying to seek to get justice for Christopher.
Well, Alina, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on the Jasper's Drive Time, and we'll be committed to making sure that we follow this case right through to its conclusion. But thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Brixton Analytica, my favourite part of the programme. We're going to be focusing on the Windrush demonstrations outside number 10 Downing Street that led to lots of people being removed off that flight to Jamaica. We'll be looking at Brexit Betty on Question Time, as I've dubbed her, Sherry Peach, member of the National Front. And we'll be looking at the case of Christopher Kapisa. You heard about the story from his mum, Alina Jospeh. We'll be looking at in a little more detail about that case. This is Brixton Analytica. Now, you may have seen me on Newsnight, one of the very few occasions in recent years where I've been on the programme. Part of my role, I'm vice chair of BME Lawyers for Justice, and we organised a demonstration in Whitehall, outside number 10 Downing Street.
I've lost the legal case, but I think we've won the moral case, because I think that the independent review by Wendy Williams was absolutely crystal clear. And I think most people, sensible people, would not want somebody who came here as a baby, as a young toddler, who committed a crime in their teenage years, now to be subject to this arbitrary deportation. But we wanted to make the point to the Prime Minister, the government and the country at large, that I will not simply stand by and see innocent people shackled, chained and forced onto that plane. We will not simply stand by and watch that. And so we exercise our right for protest, for disobedience, and we'll do so as often as it takes in order to maintain our civil, political and human rights.
Really protesting about the government's plans to deport those poor people to Jamaica, most of whom either didn't have access to legal expertise or indeed shouldn't have been on the plane because they would be deemed to be British citizens in any other country in the world. And, you know, we're going to continue that campaign. So if you haven't heard of BME Lawyers for Justice, then look us up on Twitter or on Facebook and find out more about how you can assist the overall campaign to halt these deportation flights. After all, the government has now delayed the publication of the Windrush Lessons Learned review by Wendy Williams. It's been delayed now for over a year. Why has it been delayed? Well, this government is trying to amend and dilute the recommendations. Wendy Williams, in a leaked copy of the report, said the Home Office was institutionally racist, as well as the whole hostile environment policy. And of course, Boris Johnson and Theresa May didn't want that in the public domain, so they've tried to kill the report and stop its publication. One of its other recommendations is that all deportations should cease whilst the government implements the recommendations in that report. So it's no wonder it's delayed, it's no wonder it's frustrated, and it's no wonder this government is engaged in the business of viciously trying to deport people who have a right and a right to family life in this country. You've got to remember there are kids being torn from their parents and families. We talk about them being serious criminals. Some of them on some deportation flights were deported for traffic violations. Some of them for low-level drug possession. Not major dealers, but low-level stuff. So this doesn't bear scrutiny to description of serious criminality. Now, of course, there was some serious criminals on that plane, and maybe there's an argument that they should be deported. But it tells you a lot when the government planned to deport 50 people and 17 actually flew out after the judicial reviews and legal challenges. So keep watching out for BME Lawyers for Justice as we continue this campaign to ensure that justice is done for black people subject to the hostile environment. The other interesting story that you may have seen my involvement with as Vice Chair of BME Lawyers for Justice is the story of Christopher Kapisa. He was a 13-year-old boy, lived in South Wales, who went out on the 1st of July last year with 20 or 14 or so of his mates playing by a river and ended up dead, drowning in that pool. Now, when the police came along to interview people about why he did it and how he'd ended up in that river, they only interviewed 4 out of the massive group that were there, anything between 14 and 19 people, it's reported. They only interviewed 4, and these 4 young people said in coordinated fashion that he'd actually jumped in the river and then was unable to get out, and they tried to save him. That didn't ring true to the parents, Alina, Jospeh, and her 4 boys, his brothers. And they continually said to the police, look, this doesn't make sense. Christopher couldn't swim. We don't think he'd have gone anywhere near a river. They insisted to the point that they became aggressive and defensive against the family, saying, are you telling us we don't know how to do our job? He definitely drowned. Don't listen to anything anybody else is saying. It's all rumour. Meanwhile, there was huge speculation that there was massive online activity between the children themselves, with a suspicion that some had actually recorded the death. When push came to shove, we were able to work with Hilary Brown of Virgo Consultancy down in Cardiff with offices in London to put pressure along with Suresh Grover from the monitoring group in London on the South Wales Police to reinvestigate this case with a serious case review. They did so some 4 weeks after Christopher's death at the beginning of July. And that went on all the way from July for 6 months up until the Christmas period, where they then produced a report which they submitted to the Crown Prosecution Service. The Crown Prosecution Service looked at this file, and on the 19th of February 2020, this year, sent a letter to the family saying that actually there is substantive evidence to suggest a crime of manslaughter, that Christopher didn't fall. He was actually pushed in the back with 2 hands by a young kid, 14 to 15 years of old, who was part of that group, pointing out, therefore, that the 4 who'd maintained the lie that he'd fallen in the river were engaged in an act of trying to pervert the course of justice. And let's be clear here, 14-year-old kids do not lie in coordination unless they've been coached by their parents. So I don't even blame the children so much as their parents, who would have been involved in trying to cover up what actually happened. Further, the CPS said to the family, absolutely remarkable, is that the suspect is not going to be charged because it's not in the public interest to charge him, because he is mature, good-natured, intelligent boy. As if that had any bearing on you physically pushing somebody in such a reckless fashion that they then lose their life. To write to the parents saying we're now not going to charge that individual because he's, in quotes, a good lad, seems absolutely unbelievable. And so the family are mounting a huge campaign to get the CPS to review that decision. They should reconsider the charges of manslaughter, and let me tell you why. Because if this was 14 black boys and a white boy had ended up in the river in South Wales, they would have been arrested not 4 interviewed. All 14 would have been arrested. All 14 would probably be charged with joint enterprise of some sort, and all of them would have had their mobile phones confiscated. And that certainly didn't happen with this group. All their mobile phones confiscated and examined to see what actually happened during the course of this event. So it proves to us that the institutionalised racism of the South Wales police, which came to a wrong conclusion that he'd slipped and fell into that river and didn't do a thorough investigation. The institutionalised racism of the Crown Prosecution Service that came to a conclusion that it wasn't in the public interest to pursue a charge of manslaughter and didn't consider a charge of trying to pervert the course of justice for the 4 initial young people and their parents who sought to lie as a consequence. It's absolutely outrageous. And let me tell you the consequence of their lying. The consequence of their lying is that Christopher Kapisa's mother and family have waited 8 months reliving his death every single day, wondering how did he fall in the river? What were the circumstances relating to that? You can read more on Lee Jasper's blogspot.com, my Google page, and you can also visit the Justice for Christopher Kapisa Facebook page, which is on Facebook, obviously, and we'll probably put a link in the description so you can follow it and see it there. But we're going to keep following this case for justice, and in fact we have an interview with Christopher Kapisa's mother, which we'll be bringing to you quite shortly. And finally on Brixton Analytica, did you see BBC Question Time last week? You might have seen Brexit Betty, the woman with the blonde hair sitting on the front row, who was asked a question about Brexit or something and went on this racist rant, talking about immigrants and rapes and this and crimes and a whole host of bile, bigotry and prejudice spewed forth from this woman's mouth. The BBC loved it so much they clipped it into a little viral clip and they put it on their Twitter feed. That Twitter feed went viral with people commenting one way or the other. Turns out Brexit Betty is actually Sherry Peach, and Sherry Peach has been a National Front candidate standing in 1974. She's been pictured with video and in the newspapers supporting Tommy Robinson. She was a supporter of the BNP. So we're talking about a literal fascist who's been given a front row seat on BBC Question Time. Now I have to ask the question, and we should all ask the question as taxpayers and licence payers, is what is Mentor Media, the people who produce BBC Question Time, doing, pulling fascists, giving them all expenses paid trips to London, putting them up in a 5-star hotel, and then putting her on the front row of Question Time to insult, lie, degrade minorities and black people in this nation. Somebody who, had you just Googled her, you would have seen in 2 seconds she's a bona fide fascist and a racist.
Interesting what you're saying here. 68 million people now live in England, going up, UN estimates. At what stage does the panel and people think this country has had enough? That we should close the borders, completely close the borders, because it's got to the stage now is there's no education, schooling, infrastructure. It's enough. We are sinking. Surely someone's got to see common sense and say enough is enough. You've got people flooding into this country that cannot speak English. I've come from London. In the National Health Service, everything's written in different languages. How much is that costing? How much is it costing for the interpreters? Sorry, madam, how much is it costing for the interpreters? I was in hospital last week. The interpreter never turned up for the people who couldn't speak English. She was paid. They all had to go on, and all the radiologists stood around doing nothing. What sort of country is allowing this? What sort of country is allowing this tourism to come in? You arrive in a plane, you get free service, you can have your babies, you can just carry on having it all for free. Why haven't they got points set up in the hospitals and you pay like you do in every other country you go to. You wouldn't turn up in America and be allowed to go for free.
BBC, is it any wonder people are not trusting what you're saying? And let me say, it's not the first time the BBC's done this, because they'd previously brought forward last year a fully paid up member of the EDL, English Defence League, and put them on a question time, posing as an ordinary member of the public, only to find out that they're extreme right-wing and fascist membership of these extreme right-wing organisations. What is the BBC doing? God only knows. But there's some serious questions to answer for them and the production company Mentor Media. Fortunately, Brexit Betty's been exposed, aka Sherry Peach, and she is a peach of a racist, a peach of a bigot, a peach of a xenophobe. And this is Lee Jasper on Brixton Analytica. Over and out until I see you again next week. Take care.